This is the Brisbane Lions Fancast with Dom Fay and Michael Whiting.
Yes, welcome to another episode of the Fancast where we'll be joined by Andrew Rains later in the show. But Mike, I have to say we sit here this week, another loss, but probably the most encouraging performance of the year.
Yeah, it was a big turnaround from the Sydney match, wasn't it, Dom? We harped all season about getting 4 quarters, and probably, as you touched on there, that's the first time I think we've seen 4 quarters this season, or as close to 4 quarters as we have seen this season. So, again, we get a bit excited about the young guys, and we've harped on a lot about them on this show, and we'll probably do so again today. But a couple of the older guys put their hands up as well. So it was a good mix, and 4 quarters right to the death. I mean, you know, it was a kick in it until a minute to go, and easily a decision or two could have gone Brisbane's way, and they could have snuck the victory. But not to be, but a lot more encouraging, I think.
You do feel, though, as though we've won quite a few of those close games over the past few years. We were almost due to lose one like that at the Gabba. So I did kind of have that sense throughout the last quarter, like this isn't going to work out for us this one, sadly. But it was great to see them run around in the Bears retro Guernsey. That was a highlight for me personally.
Yeah, I liked it as well. It's copped a little bit of flack in the media, I've noticed, but I thought it was really good. Maybe the people may be referring to the timing because of the dealings off the field at the club last week and bringing back the bad news Bears Guernsey, but I thought it looked really good, actually.
Well, there was a lot of offence, I think, taken by Fitzroy fans who were saying why they're wearing a Bears heritage Guernsey, because maybe the club didn't do as good a job as they should have promoting the why they were wearing that Guernsey, because obviously it was for the Hall of Fame event, just like we wore the traditional Fitzroy one against the Western Bulldogs in Melbourne in 2012. So that's what it was. It was just that up here, and it will happen again down in Melbourne in 2 years' time.
That's right, and people are quick to say that to remember the Fitzroy heritage, but it wasn't a great time, the Brisbane Bears heritage, but it's part of this club now.
Yeah.
If there wasn't the Brisbane Bears, there'd be no merger, same as if there was no Fitzroy, there'd be no merger. So it's great from the club to embrace it, and it was a fan and a member voted jumper. So I thought it was great, and they as they tend to do, Brisbane, they lifted for that jumper.
Yeah, they definitely did. Touching on a few elements of the game, obviously the standout was Marco Paparone producing a game that potentially we saw he had the promise to maybe deliver one day. I would say that I probably didn't think he was going to put that kind of a performance in this year, at least. I thought he was arguably our best on ground on Saturday.
Yeah, he was real close. Yeah, I couldn't argue with you there, Tom. Like there was a couple of guys that were vying with him, but he had a great game, and we saw a slight change in role from Justin Lepich. He's played Paparone quite high, or quite not deep as a forward, but he's played as that third tall running forward, but he played a lot more on the wing, and we were able to see his running ability go all the way to the back half and then all the way to the forward half, and really take advantage of the fact that he's a powerful runner and that he's a taller guy, and we got to see the best of that on the weekend. And a couple of his disposals were a little bit shoddy, but I think you can forgive him when he has 30 touches. And terrific performance, and I agree, like he's best for the club, no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought also Jed Adcock probably had his best game for the year. Very impressed with him. And if you're other senior guys, I mean, Merritt struggled a bit with conversion throughout the match, but presented a very strong target up forward. Brownie definitely got into space a few times and was probably burnt by a bit of delivery.
Yeah, that was hard to watch being at the ground. Obviously, you can see the play unfolding a bit more than you can on TV, and he certainly got himself into space a couple of times and probably should have had 4 or 5 shots on goal. But Merritt was a good point that you touched on him. If he had have kicked a little bit straighter as well, we'd be talking about him kicking 2 or 3 goals and doing his job. But he did present really well and was a very good target. So not sure with Matt Maguire being suspended now whether Merritt will go back or exactly what will happen there this weekend. But it's an interesting dilemma. He did play well. You touched on Jed Adcock, had a very good game. It was good to see Pierce Hanley back. He butchered the ball a few times as well, but got plenty of it. So a few of the more experienced guys, and Tom Rockcliffe, who just keeps churning out every week, but a few more of the experienced guys putting their hand up to help the young fellas at the weekend.
Absolutely, and it's nice to sit here and, despite the fact we don't have another win, have so many positives to touch on throughout that performance, which makes us look forward to the North Melbourne game just a little bit more. Although Lepper did mention in his post-match press conference that, you know, the big test now will be, can these guys sustain that form week in, week out for a whole season? Young players historically have struggled to do that. Some have done better than others, but when you've got a young core of players, you will think that you'll have some up and down performances, as we've already had this year. Do you think we can sustain that kind of an effort against North Melbourne?
Well, it is going to be tricky, and we haven't seen maybe the first 2 matches of the season when you're at your freshest against the toughest opposition too, but that was probably the best two back-to-back performances. Since then, it's been up and down, almost week about. We've seen a good performance followed by a very average one. So we're getting to that stage of the year where the young players do get tired. I noticed Nick Robinson was used as a substitution last week. That might have been a ploy to start, to nurse those younger players through the season. Aish and Taylor have played the whole time. So I imagine they're getting a little bit tired, but we've now got 1 week until the break. So it's going to be a huge test this weekend because North Melbourne needs every single win they can get. And looks like it should be an easy kill for North Melbourne, but I'm just about to use a cliche here. There's no such thing as an easy game. But
especially not for North Melbourne.
Especially not for North Melbourne. So we'll see. The game that down at Etihad last year was one of Brisbane's worst of the season, so they'll be wanting to rectify that. But it will be tough. North are a very good team. Yeah,
there is a talk going around, and maybe we have been confirmed by the time this goes on the website, that Andrew Swallow might return for North Melbourne, which would be a massive in for
Fairly
them.
big in, isn't it?
Yeah, just about as big as it gets.
Doesn't look like Daniel Wells will come up, though, so that's one good bit of news for Brisbane. But, going to be very difficult, and Swallow does add to that midfield punch, and we talk about the midfielders, and our young midfield particularly, and that's where it's won and lost nearly every week, and another difficult challenge in the middle of the ground this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And touching on North Melbourne, it is just about impossible to predict this game going forward because North Melbourne have shown this year that at their best, they're almost the best side in the competition. And
you've got them at the start of the season, Dom.
Well, I tipped them premiers at the top of the year, and their best form has suggested they could well achieve that.
And I put my hand up, and I had them in the top 4 as well. So I had them coming 4th this year, and their best is very good. They've beaten Sydney away and Fremantle away, but their worst.
Yeah, Gold Coast are having a good year, but there's no way that North Melbourne at their current stage in development should have been beaten as comprehensively by the Gold Coast in Melbourne as they were. And then obviously the Gold Coast played very well in that game, but North Melbourne were very poor in that match too, I would have said.
Yeah, absolutely they were. They were asleep in the first quarter. Gold Coast kicked the first 7 goals, and despite North Melbourne fighting back really hard, the Suns were able to steady and run away late in the game. So I guess they've had a bit of time to sit and stew on that, North Melbourne. So Brisbane's got to come up with one more big effort before the bye. Maybe a couple of selection dilemmas this week. We touched on a bit earlier, Matt Maguire being out. Would you bring in a defender or would you bring in a forward? Because obviously Merritt can go back if needed. You need some tools against North Melbourne's forward line. There's no little doubt about that.
You do, but looking at last week's lineup, I thought originally we've gone in very tall, and I don't think that it would kill us to maybe replace him with a not tall player, with a runner. I think that could help because in the past it hasn't been, from what I've seen in North Melbourne matches, it hasn't been their tools that have exposed us. It's been their run. I remember watching last year that match at Etihad, and obviously we were horrible all day, but constantly their rebound was just, they would get the ball and just rebound it within seconds.
The Atleys, the Adams, these sort of blokes,
exactly.
and obviously Boomer. But I think you're right. But their tools aren't going that well at the moment. The Drew Petrie, Mad Jack Daw. We're not sure who's going to play. Aaron Black, these sort of guys, like they haven't been setting the world on fire. So I guess you've got to be prepared to give it to Justin Clark, Joel Patfull, Darcy Gardner, and tell them to man up and take one each and leave the forward line as is with Merritt, Brown, Paparone and co.
Yeah, well, I think
Payne.
Amongst many others, I thought Clark did have his best game for the year quite comfortably on the weekend. That spoil one out with 2 Essendon defenders was just incredible. So I think I would give them a chance to do it, knowing that if need be, you can swing Merritt back. You've got that player who can do that. In terms of the runner who comes in, now this is interesting because Lepper has made some kind of comment that Clay Beams could be vaguely in contention. Personally, I'd like to see him have another week or 2 in the reserves. He's had a very, very long injury layoff. But Lepper's comments were that he will at least consider it. And if we've seen anything with his team selection so far this year, it's been that he has thrown a few curveballs and probably brought players in earlier than many expected.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if Beams came in. I'm a bit on your side here. I think he should have another week in the twos. He's missed the last 8 weeks, I think it was, with that foot injury, which obviously when you've got a foot injury, it means you're not able to run as well. So you need a little bit more conditioning, whereas if you've got a shoulder problem or something, you might be able to keep up your running. But he's missed a lot of work. I'd be inclined to give him one more week in the twos. The one factor, I guess coaches now have on their side is that he can be used as a sub, and we all know there could be an injury in the first minute and he might have to play the whole game, but it is something coaches can factor into their selections now. Can we bring him back? Can we play him for half a game or a third of a game or something along those lines? But I'm with you. I think I'd leave him in the twos just for one more week, but I wouldn't be shocked if he came back.
Absolutely. You can tell it's been a pretty good footy performance on the weekend when we didn't even touch on the CEO dramas.
Well, of course it came out about a day after our show went to air, so it seems...
Yeah,
well, it's certainly not old news at the moment because it's obviously still going to linger on until there's a new CEO found, but we've had a game in between. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I imagine there'll be a few more weeks for us to chat about those kind of things. At the moment, though, it's time for us to get to our interview with Andrew Rains.
The best way to keep track of everything Lions is to head to lions.com.au. It's the first place to find the latest Lions news and videos, get the lowdown on upcoming games, results and player stats. There's also great ways to interact with live chats, downloads and Player of the Year voting updates. And with a social media hub, you can connect with all the Lions social media activity. Lions.com.au. Everything Lions, all in one place.
This week on the Fancast, we're joined by lockdown midfielder, come new offensive midfielder, Andrew Rains. Now, obviously, it was a very encouraging performance on the weekend against Essendon. Do you come out of those games more crushed because it was close or more encouraged?
I think, you don't want to go into or finish any game on a loss. I think the boys are pretty disappointed because we had a fair chance to win the game there, especially in the last quarter. But I think, encouraging signs too, just statistically, in a few KPIs for us that were a lot better on the weekend in contested football and just fundamentals like that. So I think that, that's an encouraging side, especially with the young group. As I said, you don't want to promote, obviously, close losses, but at the same time, you want to promote the things you're doing well, and we definitely illustrated that the other night.
So what's the missing ingredient, Rainsy? When you got a young team, I guess you got to learn to win in those tight matches. What have you reviewed, and I guess what have you sort of come up with as areas to improve in those situations?
I don't know. If you put a finger on the one thing, I think it's obviously a couple of things, and that. Chances going inside 50. I think we lacked a tiny bit of polish there, and a couple of times that we could have been hitting some targets inside 50 and opportunities on goal. And then other fundamentals, from stoppages and things like that. Organisation, especially with the young group, we're just trying to hammer in communication and leadership out there, and it's no real excuse if you're a younger player there. You've got to use your voice and instruct. So they're probably two ones that I suppose just come off the top of my head that have got to be better throughout times in patches and games with concentration. But definitely we're better as a whole with our concentration levels throughout the game.
The general consensus was that you were playing a pretty good game on Saturday afternoon, so there was a bit of surprise when you were given the red sub-vest at around three-quarter time. Were you given a reason for that? Were you a bit surprised by it?
I won't lie, I was a bit surprised, but that's okay. I understand sort of where it's at. I don't know if it actually still don't know if it was pre-planned or any of that sort of stuff. But I think no, it's okay. It was explained to me. I understand exactly what happened. It was a role for role thing. So Nick Robinson's obviously another midfielder. So there's a like for like changeover. So I was getting swapped with Nick, who's a midfielder. So I have no problem with that, and that's fine. And I'm just happy being out there and playing a role for the side. And if I did that for three quarters, which I think I did, then I'm more than happy enough for that.
It's probably been a funny old season for you so far, Rainsy. You were one of the members that was sort of entrenched in the team the past couple of years. You had that tagging role, and now Lepper's come in and said that one's sort of null and void at the moment. How did you cop that early in the season when he came to you and said that tagging role wouldn't be part of the future plans at the moment?
Michael, I've been sort of hit with a lot of challenges in my career, whether that's injury or new coaches. I've had a few coaches over my time, or position changes and things like that. I just took it as another challenge. I think you've got to take that front on, and you can't really control. I couldn't really control what his game plan is, and if that's not having a tagger or a run with player as such locked in, well, that's his call, and I've got to obviously play under that. So I was okay with that. I just said, okay, well, if that's not part of the plan, then what can I do? I've got to bang down the door and continually do that. So we had a great conversation, and he's been great communicating what he wants out of me, and I'll perform that at the next level down. and it's sort of been going from there. So we have, constant conversations about, what I need to work on and what I can bring to the side. And I think it's been good for me just to release that and show my flexibility that I can play an offensive role, a defensive role, or, a role even last week where I was half forward throughout the night, which I haven't played in my whole senior career. So that was another just a string to my bow. So, I've welcomed it.
When you returned in the St Kilda match, you kicked a goal relatively early on, and you could see all of the team get around you and how much it meant to them that you'd worked your way back into this side. Was that a pretty special moment to you to realise that, I mean, obviously you haven't, this challenge is still somewhat present, but that you'd worked your way back in and that things were going pretty well?
It was really good actually, just to get off to a good start and kick the first goal over there, and just for the boys to get around me. I think it's not only me. I think it's a team thing. We've been trying to focus on getting around each other when we kick a goal, and to really bring that I suppose that mateship out there. So, but yeah, to have that showed that I was back in the side, and the boys are bigger and better around me. Then I'm more than happy with that, and obviously pretty humbled by how the boys sort of rate me inside those four walls.
Such a new team this year, Rainsy, and such a young team. Do you feel like you've sort of been thrust into a bit of a mini leadership role out there? There's not sort of too many guys that are 25 and older out on the field at the moment.
Yeah, it's been good, I suppose, just to get out there and show what I've sort of done throughout my career, and if I can implement a small thing in each week into even one bloke or two blokes out there that are in my position or my role, that you get a fair bit of kick out of that, especially if we can start getting some wins on the board. So no, I'm really enjoying just getting around the boys and trying to show these young boys how it's done. And I suppose it's all about leaving a bit of a legacy. And if I've done it, finished up in a couple of years' time, then it's exciting times for the football club. If us older blokes, not only me, we can leave a really good legacy around the place.
Obviously, you just want to be in the side playing a role for the team, but I'm just wondering on a personal level what you enjoy more, whether you really did enjoy that hard tagging role that you've done for the past few seasons, or whether you're really enjoying this new lease, being able to be a bit more offensive and a bit more, I suppose, playing the attacking style of football.
I suppose the old cliche of you're happy to do any role, but yeah, I suppose from a personal level, I just enjoy being in the midfield, I suppose, whether that's a run-with role, because I think these days there's no such thing as a couple of teams might do it, but a full-on lockdown tagger is possibly sort of gone out the window a bit, as in you need to be offensive the other way and make the opposition hurt. So if you can get that balancing act right, whether it's tagging, whether it's playing on a wing or in the midfield, I'll take on to any role, I suppose, in the midfield in that sense. So I don't mind the run-with and the challenge because I really enjoy that, that one-on-one sort of combative football, and then obviously enjoy using my strengths, and that's my speed and running power on a wing. So yeah, anywhere in the midfield's great.
Rainsy, just harking back to an incident on Saturday afternoon or Saturday night, just the collision with you and Brendan Goddard. There's been a lot of chat over the previous few days about bumps and high contact and all the rest of it. It was obviously a fair ball to go and get. Did you have any fears when you went into that contest, or even when you came out of it and Goddard was down on the ground? Like, how did you feel after that? I guess particularly after the previous week of discussion.
Yeah, no, I wasn't too worried because I knew in my mind I was going to the football. So I did get a bit. I saw BJ down on the ground. I thought I obviously got him a good one. Then I just had a quick glimpse up onto the scoreboard, and they showed the replay, and the crowd sort of were enjoying it a bit. But I thought, I was actually going at the ball, and there's nothing really I could have done there to do anything untoward. So I was fairly confident, going into the week that I'd be right.
Now, North Melbourne at Etihad have proved a challenge for the club for a number of years now. Is there any, I suppose, trepidation from the past coming into this match, or would you say that probably the enthusiasm of these young players and a strong performance on the weekend has you guys confident that you can turn that around?
Yeah, I think we haven't performed well there in the past against North Melbourne. Definitely got it with such a new group, and then even with Leper on board, we haven't really touched on that at all this week. It'd be interesting to see if we do, but I don't think we will. It's a new side and a new season, so we're just got to, I suppose, worry about what we're doing in the context of the game and take North Melbourne head on and give it a crack. So I think that's been our attitude most of the season, and it's important for us to play well in the state in front of our our Victorian supporter base. So we're just got to have the right attitude going into that game.
It's probably one of the cliches I hate the most, Rainsy, but people are a bit talking about coming to play and getting a fast start and all that sort of stuff. But with North Melbourne, I guess they had a reputation, particularly last year, for jumping out quicker than any other team. Yeah. How important is it to have that attitude spot on from the first bounce?
Oh, it is. It's obviously very, very important, but at the same time too, you see games, where people struggle to get over the line. So I think it's just that consistency throughout the quarter, and I suppose with us, with the young group, I think for us as the focus is that last 5 or 10 minutes, where I think the stat even came up on the television the other night, and we've definitely seen it throughout the season. It's just that we're actually starting games okay, or starting the quarters, or it's just sustaining for that full half an hour or 25 minutes or however long the quarters go for. Is that whole quarter effort, and especially in that red time area, if we can sort of lock down and keep our concentration levels going, then I think for a young side going forward, just to get that effort is something we'll probably focus on.
Just one more before we let you go. It's taken until round 9 for you guys to play down in Melbourne in front of your Victorian supporters. I imagine that's probably a bit disappointing for the club in general, but is it really exciting that you do get to go down there finally? Because I imagine that is a supporter base that means, in many ways, more in some respects, but just as much to you as the traditional support base up here.
Yeah, it's great. We get a great response when we go down there, the Fitzroy supporters and the Victorian supporters. I think we had actually a family day at the start of the year, and a lot of young boys in that NAB Cup team. We had it after the day of that game, and they just experienced the Victorian sports for the first time and how passionate they are. And I think that was a really good day for a lot of the young boys to see. So to play in front of that will be great, and even the functions and appearances we do throughout our time in Melbourne down there is really important for us, and just to get that I suppose that home feeling in Melbourne. So I think it's a great thing that the football club's doing.
Well, all the best for the game on Saturday. Hopefully we can get the second win for the year.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate your time.
This weekend, both sides, the reserves and the seniors, travel interstate. The reserves are up in Darwin, taking on the Northern Territory Thunder. That is 7 p.m. on Saturday night. The seniors are down in Melbourne, also on Saturday, at Etihad at 4:40 p.m. against North Melbourne, which, as I mentioned a little earlier in the show, Mike, I am finding the hardest match to tip for us this year. It's just, I think with North Melbourne, near to impossible to make any kind of accurate prediction.
Yeah, they've proved that. They've been a little bit up and down too, haven't they? But I reckon they've had a week to sit on that loss against Gold Coast. I'm sure Brad Scott's been reading the riot act, and I think they'll come out. Brisbane's going to have to weather a storm in the first quarter, exactly like last year when the Kangaroos jumped from the gates quickly and the game was over at quarter time. So if Brisbane can withstand that, they might have a chance as the match wears on, but I think North will get the chocolates on the weekend.
Yeah, well, I mean, last year we played them twice. The first match we lost by 63, the second we won by 12, so you just don't quite know what you're going to get with North. It will be interesting to see how that unfolds on Saturday. We'll be back next week to dissect that match and assess the state of affairs heading into the bye. That's it for the Fancast this week. Bye.
See ya.